You didn't lose people. Your brain slowly made sure they never stayed. It didn't look like sabotage. It looked like independence. It looked like, I just need space. It looked like not texting back, not opening up, not asking for help when you clearly needed it. And over time, it started to feel like a pattern you couldn't explain. People come close, and then something shifts. They fade, or you do. And you tell yourself the same story every time. They weren't right. They didn't understand you. They couldn't meet you where you are. But there's a reason this keeps happening, and it's not what you think. Because this isn't about other people failing you. This is about a system inside you that was trained to interpret closeness as risk. Your nervous system doesn't measure love the way you think it does. It measures safety. And if at some point in your life connection became unpredictable, overwhelming, or painful, your brain adapted. Not consciously, not logically, but biologically, through what psychologists call attachment conditioning, the process by which early relational experiences wire your expectations of intimacy. In simple terms, your brain learned that getting close comes with a cost, so it built a defense. That defense lives in your threat perception circuitry, the part of your brain constantly scanning for emotional danger. And here's the part most people never realize. It doesn't need real danger. It only needs familiarity. If something feels like what once hurt you, your brain treats it as if it will hurt you again. So when someone starts getting too close, your system activates. Not loudly, quietly. You become slightly distant, slightly distracted, slightly unavailable. You don't even notice it happening at first, but they do, and they respond to it. And that response confirms your internal belief: people don't stay. This is the avoidance reinforcement loop. You pull back to feel safe, they feel the distance and pull away, and their withdrawal becomes proof that you were right to protect yourself in the first place. This is where it turns. Because now your brain isn't just protecting you from pain, it's training you to expect abandonment, even when it's being caused by your own defense. On the surface, it looks like you're just not finding the right people, but underneath, your identity preservation bias is at work. That's the mechanism that keeps your self-image consistent, even if that self-image is limiting. If somewhere deep down you've internalized the idea that people leave, your brain will subtly guide your behavior to make that belief feel true. Not because it wants you to suffer, because it wants you to feel predictable. There's a study by psychologist John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, that revealed something uncomfortable. Humans will often choose familiar pain over unfamiliar safety. Not consciously, but instinctively. Because familiarity feels like control. So, even when something healthy enters your life, it doesn't feel safe. It feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels dangerous. That's why you overanalyze their tone. That's why you hesitate to open up. That's why you keep parts of yourself hidden, even when there's no clear reason to. You're not being difficult. You're being consistent with a system that was built to keep you from being hurt the way you once were. But here's the contradiction no one tells you about. The same system that protects you from rejection also guarantees disconnection. You don't get to have one without risking the other, and your brain knows that. So it chooses the version of loneliness it can control. There's a metaphor that captures this perfectly. Imagine your emotional world as a house with a fire alarm that was set too sensitively years ago. It goes off not just when there's a fire, but when there's warmth. So every time someone brings closeness, something real, something potentially meaningful, the alarm triggers. Not because you're in danger, but because your system can't tell the difference between heat and harm. So what do? You open the windows, you let the warmth out, and then you sit in the cold, wondering why nothing ever lasts. At some point, this stopped being about other people and became about what your system won't allow. This is the part that challenges your self-image, because you've probably told yourself you're just independent or selective or hard to understand. But what if that's not strength? What if it's adaptation? What if the version of you that doesn't need anyone was never a personality, but a response? A response to moments where needing someone didn't feel safe. And here's the predictive line most people avoid facing. If this pattern continues unchanged, your world doesn't collapse dramatically. It narrows, quietly, Gradually, you become more self-contained, more emotionally efficient, less expressive. Relationships become shorter, shallower, easier to leave, and eventually, easier to lose. Not because you're unworthy of connection, but because your system was never retrained to sustain it. This is where it becomes self-sabotage, because now the threat isn't other people, it's the way your brain filters them. Every delayed reply feels like distance. Every small inconsistency feels like a warning sign. Every moment of closeness triggers the question, how long until this changes? And that question changes how you show up. Less open, less present, less invested. And people feel that. They don't always know why, but they feel it. So they adjust, and the cycle, once again, completes. But here's what this pattern is really protecting you from. Not rejection, not abandonment, exposure. Because closeness requires something your system learned to avoid, being fully seen without control, without the ability to manage how much of you is revealed, how fast, and with what protection. To be known is to be vulnerable to loss, and your brain decided a long time ago that loss at that level was unacceptable. So it chose distance, even if that distance costs you connection. Even if it costs you depth, even if it costs the very thing you think you're searching for. And this is the hidden cost no one warns you about. You don't just lose people, you lose the version of yourself that only exists in safe connection. The version of you that's open, expressive, unguarded. That version doesn't disappear. It gets suppressed, waiting for an environment your system no longer trusts. So the question from the beginning, why does this keep happening? It's not because people always leave. It's because something in you leaves first. Not physically, but emotionally, subtly, automatically. And until that's seen clearly, the pattern doesn't break. It repeats. But awareness changes the equation. Not instantly, not comfortably, but precisely. Because once you see that your distance isn't personality, but protection, you can no longer fully believe the story that it's just who you are. And that creates tension, a different kind of tension, the kind that doesn't push people away, but forces you to confront the system itself, not to destroy it, but to understand it. Because your brain isn't broken, it's loyal. Loyal to a version of you that needed protection at a time when you didn't have better options. The problem is, it never updated the strategy. So now the same protection that once kept you safe keeps you alone. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it, which means the next time you feel the urge to pull back, to close off, to create distance, it won't feel automatic anymore. It will feel like a decision. And that's where everything begins to shift. Not because the pattern disappears, but because you're no longer completely inside it. And if you've been following this closely, you already feel where this is going, because this isn't just about why people leave. It's about what your mind does when someone tries to stay. And that's a pattern most people never examine until it's too late. So if this felt uncomfortably accurate, there's a reason. And the next layer of this, what actually happens in your brain when someone finally doesn't leave, is where it gets even more precise. That's where we go next.